Well, Don, it is wonderful to have you here with us today. John, welcome back.
Nice to be back.
Yeah.
I missed you, John.
Oh. So I think you can go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Get started as you are
Does
ready.
anybody have a pen?
Yes. Actually, is there one in the little bin right behind you?
Got one right here.
Yeah.
On
markers. Oh, okay.
There's one there. There you go.
That's a pen. Chocolate rice.
Okay. Okay. I was scared about it. Lawyer. And write something. Well, sorry I wasn't here last week. Can you hear me this? Yeah. Right, okay. Uh, I finished moving from one apartment to another, and I thought I acted as if I were 42 instead of 92, and it showed up on Sunday morning. So anyway, good to be with you, and good to be with John, and very happy to be part of this series uh, in which we can learn something about Buddhism. It is not uh, not like studying Islam, which is much larger in its size, but Buddhism has some interesting features to it. Uh, John and I put our heads together and thought that what might be helpful today is for me to talk about how I got interested in Buddhism. And when I talked about it with some of my Buddhist friends, one of them said, how did you become interested in Buddhism? He said, it was your karma. It was meant to be. It came out of the blue, the initial exposure. For some reason or other, the National Lutheran Council decided to send me to an interreligious conference in Madras, India. It's now called Chennai, but at that time it was called Madras. And the conference was held on the campus of the Gurukul Lutheran Seminary. The professor of systematic theology there, Mikkel van Broek, is a direct lineal descendant of Martin Luther himself. But anyway, he was a personal friend of the Dalai Lama, and he arranged this conference. So there I was, and it was a community of all sorts of people, a few Theravada Buddhist monks from Southeast Asia, one of whom was an American convert, and two Zen Roshis. The Roshi would be the equivalent of a clergyman or a monk or the like. One of the Roshis, Kapichi Kadawaki, offered to teach people Zen meditation, Zazen. And I thought, well, that'll be an interesting experience. So I signed up for it, which meant I had to get up at 5 in the morning to get to the Gurukul Seminary at 6, so we could do Zazen before community worship at 7, followed by breakfast finally at 8. I learned sort of the fundamentals, the very simple basics of Zazen. In the process of that, I discovered that the two Roshis were actually Roman Catholic priests. Father Kadawaki was on the faculty at Sophia University, the Jesuit university in Tokyo. And so, my goodness, what were these Roman Catholic priests doing? Studying and living out Zazen and being tied into Zen Buddhism. Then I discovered that Father Kadawaki had written a book called The Bible and Zen. And when I got back to the United States, I read it, and he talked about the potential and implicit flow of dimensions of spiritual life between Buddhism and Christianity. So that was my initial exposure. One of the interesting things that happened, I don't know if John mentioned this, but Buddhism grew out of Hinduism. And in Hinduism, there's the sense of a succession of life. And the Buddhists have maintained that, although they have a modified understanding of what it is that moves from one life to another. There's not something solid like a soul. But in any event, the last speaker was the Dalai Lama. There were maybe 100 of us at this conference. We were all, he was leaving the platform, moving forward, and we were sending him off with dasho, as it's called, the sign of respect that you find throughout Asia, Southern Asia, East Asia. And as he was walking, I was looking at him, and he stopped and he pointed his finger at me and said, "Do I know you?" What I should have said was, "Not in this way." He had a great sense of humor. Anyway, that was sort of an initial exposure. Then I taught the Lutheran Seminary in Hong Kong, lived there for half a year. And I heard that there was a Buddhist Christian conference going on at Shan, which is a Lutheran retreat center, and also has a chapel there for both an American and then also for a Chinese-speaking congregation at work, and that's where I worshipped on Sundays, was up there with the English-speaking congregation. And they said they were having this conference, so I decided I'm going to check this out. So off I went, and it was absolutely fascinating. There was a professor from the religion department at Purdue University there. We were talking. He said, "You must come to the conference that we're having this summer." And so I made plans and went. It was a gathering of absolutely stellar Christian theologians and Buddhist interpreters. It included people like, I don't know if you recognize these names, Rosemary Radford Ruther, who is the leading Roman Catholic feminist theologian of the 20th century. Also Hans Kung, German theologian, the extreme liberal Roman Catholic theologian of the 20th century, Gordon Kaufman from Harvard, on and on. And they were seated at this big table. And then there was space, and then around that was a donut of all us onlookers. And I heard their conversation, and it really intrigued me. And then they announced in the process of that gathering for 2 days that they were going to found a society for Buddhist Christian studies. And they passed around a yellow legal pad, and I signed up. And I became one of the first members of that society, which still functions. And I attended their annual meeting. And eventually, I just didn't want to study Buddhism. I wanted to practice Buddhism, and that's what Buddhism is interested in. They don't say, "What do you believe?" They say, "How's your practice going?" So I wanted to practice it. And so I made inquiry where I could go to a Zen meditation center, and one, one of the members of the society said, "Zen, that's the Marine Corps." And I was heading to Buddhist Paris Island. But I ended up going on one of my sabbaticals. I spent time out in Marin County, California, north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And there is a Buddhist community there that is not only a study center and a worship center, but they grow the vegetables served at what was then still extant, it's closed since, the Buddhist vegetarian restaurant in San Francisco. They grew the vegetables there in the fields. And part of the discipline was to do work in the fields, or there was also a flower garden. That's where I was assigned, sometimes outside. Everybody had a job, and total silence in the morning. First of all, you did seated meditation for an hour, and then you carried out your work schedule in silence. Only necessary talk involved. Anyway, I spent 6 weeks there. And then I returned at the 1 month Christmas program at Trinity Seminary, where students and faculty stay, students take one course from one professor. And at that time, I was free, and I went back there to Green Gulch Farm, as it's called, for Rohatsu Session, which is a very intense Zen practice. The pattern, it's a symbolic pattern of the awakening of the Buddha himself. And you are on the cushion most of the day. When you're not on the cushion, you're doing walking meditation. So you get some movement, which is important. You put your hand on the shoulder of the person in front of you, and in silence, you walk. And we even had all our meals seated on the cushion. And again, no work, just, yes, the whole vegetable, or for no thank you. And a very charged atmosphere. If you wanted to, I couldn't handle it, but if you wanted to, people would stay up all night, the last evening, meditating, and then again, more meditation the next day. But no, excuse me, you finally, in the darkness, you were led out in walking meditation through the garden, and you could smell the flowers and stuff blooming. In January, because it's, San Francisco, it's climate. The flowers never know what summer is. It's always changing. But anyway, getting off the track. Out into the fields and wait for the morning star to appear. And that's where, according to the legend, when the morning star appeared, the Buddha clicked, woke up, got it, figured out why things are the way they are, how to deal with dissatisfaction and the suffering that comes from dissatisfaction. But the fog obscured the morning star.
Oh.
But we stood in the field silently, and suddenly, look, there it was. It disappeared. Clouds parted just a little bit. You could see the morning star, planet Venus. And then longer, gone. And it was doing this, and finally cleared. And it was so we all cheered, and so we went back into the Zendo, and members of the community showered us with flowers, which is what happened according to the legend when the Buddha woke up. And so we were newborn baby Buddhists. And I was writing poetry then. I had never written poetry before in my life, but something got stirred up with all that meditation, kind of falling deep into myself. And you weren't supposed to write anything, but I started to write these poems down because I couldn't remember them. And I went in to see the abbot of the community, and I said I couldn't refrain from writing these down, and I recited several to them, and he said, "They're good." And I said, without any ego, I said, "I know."
Wow.
And I didn't stop to think.
Could you talk a little bit louder? Is it possible
Yes.
just to speak?
I didn't stop to think. He's a published poet himself. And there it was. And I only remember one poem that came out of that experience looking for the morning star. The morning star plays peekaboo with newborn baby Buddhas. Anyway, so I had that deep experience as well as the intellectual stimulation of discussion with both Buddhist and Christian colleagues. So that's how I ended up without any inkling that would ever happen in my life. All because the National Lutheran Council, for some unknown reason, sent me off to a conference in India. Maybe I ought to stop here. And later on, you can ask some questions from me and see how I can respond. Turn it over to you, John.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate sort of that living experience that you portrayed, in those stories, and the truth of practice, which was conveyed very deeply through that message. That ties in really nicely to what we're going to begin in a little bit of actual meditation. As I mentioned last week, we're going to just have a little taste of 3 different practices of meditation. You know, unless you want to stay up all night. No? Oh, okay. All right. I just thought. But anyway, we'll just actually do about approximately 10 minutes of meditation for each of the times. And then have some time afterward to discuss our experience. I mean, you certainly are free to ask questions at any time, but what I'd like to encourage is more of a tell us what this experience was for you, and what you felt, and what it brought up for you. To talk about sort of those kind of personal reflections of the experience. So to begin with meditation, first of all, there's sort of like a million different types, a million different postures, even. We're gonna practice, sitting in a chair. I won't ask you to get on the floor cross-legged. But if you do want to do that, if you do want to do that, there are cushions that were specifically designed for us Westerners and our bodies, that support you, so that you're not like literally sitting on a hard floor. There's two pieces to it. There's a wider, flat cushion that's where your ankles and legs rest on. And on top of that is a smaller cushion about that high that is fairly stiff and substantial, to provide support. And you can get these all over the place. There's stores in town you can pick them up, or you can pick it up online. If you can't find them, let me know. I can point you in the direction of where you could find some of those. But we're just going to focus on sitting meditation. So the posture is very, very important, because it is part of the practice. For example, keeping your legs straight on the floor, feeling the earth, and feeling that centeredness. In many statues of the Buddha, you will see one arm touching the earth. And that is, at the point of his enlightenment, it is said, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it is said that, that the earth is my witness of, what I am saying and what is true. So that was where he began the teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path that we talked about. And all of those things, all those lists, all those PowerPoint slides, so to speak, that's where it started. So when you're sitting, it's important to, first of all, imagine your spine. Your spine is not supposed to be straight, but it has a natural curve to it. But one way to think about the right posture is just imagine a string inside of you going from your tailbone up through your neck and out the top of your head. And just imagine that you're pulling it up just a smidge, like that. And you've got that erect posture. They say that one expression of it is that when you're sitting, you should have a strong back and a soft front. And that actually is part of the teaching, because the strong back represents confidence and courage, and the soft front represents compassion and empathy and caring. And those are, two of the skills that many of the meditation techniques focus on. So the practice, and this particular practice may or may not be familiar to you. Give it a try. Feel free to adapt it if you need to. One thing that's very important is listen to your body. If your body doesn't quite want to do something, then it's okay to shift a little bit, or make a little bit of movement. Find the place that's right for you. Think about uh, think about when you're seated. You could think of it almost as being on a throne, and you're a monarch. Um, Not in the sense that you're power hungry or any of those things, but just the fact that you have dignity. There's a dignity to what you're doing. And that's something I think in the West we don't really remember or focus on very much. But that, have a touch of formality to the practice. That there is a dignity to what we're doing, that it's part of a 26 plus 100-year lineage. People have been practicing these techniques for centuries upon centuries, and that it is part of what we, are doing today. Some things have changed, some things remain the same, but that is part of what you want to think about. And when you're, kind of on your throne, so to speak, feel that you have a place. There is a place for you here, right now. And that's part of the dignity of what we're doing. Now, what I've set up here is a very simple, we call it a shrine, but think of it basically as a place that helps you and supports your meditation practice. There's no religious connotations to it in particular. I'll add elements each week. I didn't want to just like throw them all at you at once because it might get distracting, and I don't want to do that. But one of the things you'll see in one of the next two meditations is a little picture. And it's very ornate and really crazy looking. And I'll encourage you to, come up, pick it up, look at it, at some point during class if you like. But it is a picture of what is called the primordial rigdon. Let me explain what that is. Basically, it references a legend. A legend of a mythical land of Shambhala. And in that land, there was a king. And this king met the Buddha and said, I want to practice, I want to be enlightened, but I'm a ruler. I have responsibilities to my people. I can't just become a monastic. And that was said to be where then the teachings of what we might call lay Buddhism or householder Buddhism began. A set of teachings that were designed for people who are living in the real world, have jobs, have families, have all the normal craziness that goes on in our lives. And so the image of the primordial rigdon is a person who is deeply alive and involved and in the world and is able to still practice and still become awakened, even though they're in the world. Monasticism is not a requirement, luckily for all of us. And also, remember I told you last week that Buddhism you know, especially in the West, we don't think in terms of gods or deities or things like that in the way that Christianity does. Um, what we think of is that the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas and the primordial Rigdon and all Rigdons throughout time are examples. They are someone who has walked the path ahead of us, and we can see that because they could do it, so can we. In fact, it's critical that you don't think of them as gods or as super people or something like that, because that takes the whole point of it away. The point is the Buddha, the historical Buddha, was a person just like us, and he was able to awaken. And because he could, because all these other bodhisattvas could, so can we. So when we meditate, we are carrying on that tradition and that lineage. So that's why I say there's a touch of dignity to the whole thing, because it is very, very important in terms of the core message of Buddhism. Now, what I'd like to do is just give you a few other instructions, but the first and foremost, don't try to get it right. You know, there is no right and wrong. It's a practice. Um, I'll give you, normally this is silent meditation, but I'll give you little prompts and reminders through the time just because it may be your first time doing this. I'm just curious, not calling anybody out or anything one way or the other, but I'm just curious. Do any of you have a meditation practice already? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So this, what we do may or may not seem similar. Just give it a try. If you like it, you're welcome to continue with it. We'll do a different practice over the next 2 weeks, so you get kind of a sampling of different kinds of things. But this one is called shamatha, which means calm abiding. It's considered kind of the foundation. You know, even meditation masters that have been doing it for all their lives still practice this regularly. It's not that it's meditation 101 or anything like that. It's foundation in that this is the core practice upon which all other practice is built. So that's why we start with this one. So when we meditate, and you can practice the we're not actually meditating yet, but we'll practice the posture. Remember, strong back, soft front, legs on floor, hands at your side, on your knees, or whatever's comfortable for the way your arms work. One way to think about where to place your knees or your arms is just put your hands up like this and just let them flop down. And wherever they flop down, that's probably the right place. You want to think of it as a very stable position, one that's not uncomfortable, although you might experience a bit of discomfort, and that's normal, but no big deal. We'll be focusing on the breath. You focus on the in-breath and the out-breath. Don't force anything. It's not like you're doing deep breathing exercises or you're trying to breathe as slowly as possible. Be very natural. Be very restful. And that's the whatever that means for you, that's the right breath. But we focus on it. We focus on the breath because that's our core experience. If you're not breathing, there's really no point in doing any meditation. because you're off somewhere else. Eyes in this particular practice are open, which is a little bit different than maybe what some of you practice. Normally, we like to say that keep your gaze soft. You know, you're not laser focused on any one thing, which is a bit different than Zazen. Um, we keep a soft focus and aim for about maybe 6 to 8 feet in front of you all along the floor. So for me, you know, I would be looking sort of like that. And that's how you, and just keep your eyes open. Don't focus on anything. The reason we go eyes open is because this is a practice that teaches us to live off the cushion or off the chair, so to speak. And we have that ability to take our meditation practice into the world, into our everyday lives. And remember the example of we take our practice then off the cushion into our everyday lives, just like the Rigdon did. Our example of somebody who is living, you know, a normal everyday life and yet still can be enlightened. Thinking. Now, this is probably one of the areas most misunderstood about meditation. It's not about not thinking. If you're not thinking, you're dead. Thinking is just a normal part of the process. We want to focus on the breath, but inevitably, we all will start thinking of something, either lunch or our shopping or, you know, what crazy sermon is Dave going to have next week, or what we're going to do for dinner tonight. This stuff just pops up. That is normal. And the practice is to just simply, when you notice that you're thinking, just say, oh, thinking. Okay, that's interesting. And just return your concentration back to the breath. You didn't do anything wrong when you think. That's something very, very important to understand. The meditation practice, the goal isn't to, well, we can argue whether there even is a goal, but we'll ignore that. The idea is that the practice is to get used to noticing that you're distracted, noticing that you're not in the moment, and returning to that. So it's sort of like going to the gym. You know, when you go to the gym, you work out, you have sore muscles, your form may be kind of crappy at first or whatever, but that's part of the process. And what we're learning is to be, when we're at the gym, learning to exercise in a healthy, correct manner so that we don't injure ourselves and so that we can, you know, build strength and endurance. In meditation, that act of returning to the breath is the core concept itself. Don't worry about the fact that you were thinking. You might go off in thought in the next 10 minutes 50 different times. Fine, great. Doesn't matter. The point is that you learned to come back to your breath. And then when you're living your normal lives, you may be in a conversation with someone and they just all of a sudden, you know, you realize, oh, I just forgot something. And I was thinking about something instead of listening to them. And you have that muscle memory to return to the present moment and to think. Remember last week I said that the whole key of enlightenment, one of the kind of core understandings of it is that you see things as they are. This is a practice to help us do that. So what we're going to do, we're about ready to start now. We'll do 10 minutes. I've got a fancy little meditation timer here that I will set off in a moment. And we'll do, what was it, 25 hours? Was that what we said to do? No, I'm sorry, 10 minutes. And we'll begin. Sort of, like I said, there's a little bit of dignity to this practice. So I am acting kind of in the role of what they call timekeeper. There's a fancy Tibetan term for it, but I won't bore you with that. When I stand up, everyone who is able, please stand up, and I will move forward to the shrine. Now, before I go any further, let me ask, is there anybody who's allergic to or bothered by incense to the degree that I probably shouldn't light it? Okay. Well, I mean, we don't have to do it if it bothers you. Would you rather we not? Okay. Then what I'll do is I'll go up, acknowledge the incense. The purpose of the incense isn't something really exotic or anything, but it's just simply a sensory cue. Again, everything up there, including all the craziness I'll add later, is there to support our practice. That's its only function, and to remind us about our practice and what it is that we're practicing. So I'll go up, I'll touch the incense to my forehead, and I'll set it back down. I will not light it. And then we'll return here. When I sit down, that's your cue to sit down. And you'll hear me with interesting conjuncture of east meets west. I will hit the gong 3 times, and that will indicate the start of the meditation. It'll go on for 10 minutes. I will give you some prompts through this time to remind you about certain things. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, you'll hear 3 more chimes, and that'll indicate the end. And then we'll have about 5 or 10 minutes to just have conversation about what this experience has been for you. Any questions before I begin? Okay. For those that can, please stand. Remember, strong back, soft front, natural breathing, eyes open about 6 to 8 feet in front of you with a slight downward cast. Soft gaze. Don't focus on anything. Be aware of everything. your mind wanders, gently return to focusing on the breath. Realize that you were thinking. Don't beat yourself up. Just return to the breath. You're starting to feel a little uncomfortable. It's okay to wiggle or change positions, whatever you need to do. A little discomfort is normal. Pain is not. If you can, keep your back off the back of the chair so that you're supported by your posture. But if your body doesn't like that, that's perfectly fine as well. focus on the natural in-breath and out-breath. Just simply be aware of reality as it is, open and without a bunch of fantasies or mental constructs, just simply the beautiful simplicity of what is. Thank you for the practice together. In Buddhist lingo, this is called Sangha, community. Community of people walking a path. What was that like for you? Anyone want to talk about the experience?
I was surprised that you rang the bell to end the meditation far sooner than I expected. I was expecting to feel like this is going to take forever.
And sometimes it will. I mean, there maybe it's there's a little novelty or whatever, but some days 10 minutes can seem like 10 years. Um, but and that goes to one thing I didn't say earlier. It's not about the amount of time you meditate, but it's about the consistency. If you want to take meditation practice, if you only can manage right now 5 minutes a day, that's better than 1 hour randomly every few weeks or something like that. You know, that little day-to-day consistency is what's really key. So don't try to become a meditation power lifter overnight. Just do what feels right for you. Yes.
I was just saying that I meditate every day, twice a day. And I meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. Now, sometimes it gets a little, but it's hard. Sometimes I was a lawyer and you had to do something. But I always did it, and it made a profound change in my life. It really did. Um,
Thank you.
It's been a very long time since I've meditated with my eyes open. And I found it almost easy to not have all the things I'm trying to chase out of my head when my eyes are closed. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, the eyes open technique is a technique that keeps us anchored.
Yes. Yes, thank you. It's been a very, very long time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that. It
You know,
is much easier to stay focused on the breathing and allow things to just come and go than to have like the movie screen of all the stuff going on.
I found it interesting because I focused on Sarah's blue shoes. And for me, focusing on a color is very soothing. But I was aware and not aware and aware and not aware. It was like wavy. So that was really nice.
There's interesting you mentioned color because there are some more advanced meditation practices we won't get into here. That focus on entities that represent different mind states, and they're each associated with a different color. With this practice, part of what you learn is kind of where your natural disposition is, toward which of those mind states. And there's a kind of a impacted or impeded version of it and an awakened version of it. So, for example, for me, it's considered the Vajra is mine. The primary color for that is blue, and the awakened state is discerning awareness, and the impeded version of that is anger and aggression. But when you mention color, I just want to mention that just because if that's something that resonates with you, there are practices that can focus on that. Someone else? I think we're just about at time. This hour went really quickly. But any last? Yeah.
Do you recommend breathing in through nose, out through mouth? Does that matter in terms of, is there a recommended way in terms of this practice?
That is the recommendation, in through your nose, out through your mouth. I didn't mention that. But that's mainly just to kind of try to relax the jaw, and people hold a lot of tension in their head and their face, and that's a technique to kind of try to lessen that. For some people, they find that helpful.
I understand by focusing on your nostrils is a way to keep yourself focused in the present. Because you're watching your breath go out, you're watching your breath come in, and that has you anchored in the here and the now. And that helps you, that you're not caught up in what some Buddhists call the monkey mind, where it's like a monkey running through the trees, from this thought to that thought to the next thought. And that so your consciousness is focused on the breath by focusing on the nostrils. Thank you.
Any last thoughts? I mean, this is fun, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Let me add that Alfred North Whitehead once said that Christianity is a religion trying to become a philosophy. Buddhism is a philosophy trying to become a religion. So it's wrong on both counts. And it's not true at all. Buddhism is a psychology. Think of it primarily that way. Buddhism is not even a religion as you usually think of religion. Buddhism is a psychology. And that's why people who are not Buddhists can learn from Buddhist practice, and why it's not surprising that the first Buddhist-Christian dialogue that took place between monastic communities. So it was those who had a discipline of shaping their consciousness in the Christian tradition, of course, through prayer and a kind of Christian meditation. And so that was the natural path where the two could connect. And of course, it's moved beyond that. So what we're dealing with is not so much a religion, much less a philosophy as such, but there's very sophisticated philosophical reflections in Buddhism. That's not the point. The point is it's a psychology. And
when you say that, Don, you talked about like consciousness, but when you say it's a psychology, you have in like a couple sentences, can you say how that is distinctive from a philosophy or a religion?
well, a religion is a pattern of reaching beyond yourself to something transcendent. It may be something very uncomplicated as and particularly expression of things like worship. Think of Shintoism in Japan, where there is an object of Shinto worship is a particular waterfall. It's the majesty of the waterfall, the beauty of the waterfall, that there is something in a sense sacred, other than normal. Transcendent is the fancy word there, expressing itself. And so religion is really dealing with the transcendent. Now, there are aspects of Buddhism that can move into that and have moved into it. But more centrally, it is a way of shaping your mind, because the human mind seems to be crazy in certain respects, or too often. We're caught up in stuff in our consciousness. So learn how to shape your consciousness. And the result is a more humane human being. And philosophy, of course, is trying to see the more abstract questions. What's the relationship between say this a religious formula and the way of looking at the reality of being as such, or something like that? It's much more abstract and intellectual. Buddhism is not intellectually primarily, it's shaping one's consciousness. And the Buddha said the fruit of that is coming to your true self, which is not the usual ego. In a certain sense, one of the results is that your ego softens and maybe even well, I dare to say disintegrates. So that's the ultimate goal. That's nirvana. It's when that self-centered self is softened and displaced by a wider reality. And so that's wisdom or insight. The fancy Sanskrit word is prajna. But along with it, the second fruit of that shaping of consciousness is karuna, compassion. As your ego is modified, you become more compassionate, open to others, and care about them. Even blades of grass. That's other animal species and the like. So those are the fruits of that kind of transformation of consciousness.
Thank you for that distinction. Thank you.
So to close, and we'll do this for the next two classes too, again, kind of being this is sort of a modified Sangha. We'll stand, we'll do a short vow, and that's basically just acknowledging the practice. And there's a tradition, we won't go through the formal tradition, but a dedication of merit, which will sound weird to Lutheran ears. But the idea is whatever merit was accumulated, whatever insight, whatever has been helpful, may it be of benefit to all beings. So please stand if you can. Put your hand on your hip, something like that, and just do a short bow in gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.